Welcome to Liquidity Matters, the podcast that where we explore the innovations and reshaping the financial services. This is our fourth podcast, and today we have a very distinguished guest, Scott Ehrlich. And I'll welcome Scott and introduce yourself, Scott.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Chief Innovation Officer at Sinclair Inc. We own almost 200 television stations across America, four broadcast networks, cable network, the Tennis Channel, a lot of digital properties, and a partridge in a pear tree. It's a fairly large company. Been there about 7 years, and really was brought in to find ways to create growth. Broadcast is an old business. There's no secret there. Local broadcast has been a challenging business. No secret there either. But I've spent an entire career going into old businesses and creating new models. And that's what we've been doing for the last few years at Sinclair.
Awesome. That is very exciting to hear. So, Scott, you talked about innovation, and you've been in this industry for a long time, the media industry. But I'm sure you're following innovation in all other aspects in the technology. So, what is apart from AI, the obvious one that we're talking about, where
Sure.
where do you see some of the evolutions are happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, working backwards, AI is a really big one. But I think it's more about spotting trends, right? So last 30 years, I've been in a combination of situations. So I've worked for large companies like NBC, which when I worked there was owned by General Electric. I was at News Corp, which is the parent company of Fox. I was at Real Networks, which was, the granddaddy of streaming. Did a bunch of things on my own. Started a few companies. So I've been on multiple sides of this. And one of the things that you start to spot over time is trends. Technology comes into the market, people get really excited about it, they get overexcited about it, they get super overexcited about it, and they're so far ahead of where the money is and the ability to commercially scale that piece of technology that eventually there's a crash. And it's usually after that crash that value really gets created. So if you look at the internet, wave one, right? 94, 95, Netscape Navigator goes, everybody starts pouring money. Everything's got to be .com everything, .com everything. And then, as many of us remember, 99 fell off a cliff and nobody wanted to be in the internet. 10 years later, by 2010, the internet was a very strong and growing business, and it continued to grow and grow and grow. Streaming, same thing, right? Came in, everything was streaming, hype, crash, right? Then people started to build proper streaming businesses. And what I've always tried to do is target that second wave, right? The number of pitches I've heard in the last 2 years, 3 years that are some version of, you've heard this 5 times before, but now we put the letters AI at the end, so it's all different, right? And you just go, no, it was a bad idea before, it's a bad idea now, you just added 2 letters to it. Like, what are we doing? You can start to sort of look ahead. And, for me, this started, this current wave is a little bit about what we saw with Web3, right? Web3 had a big hype cycle. Everybody saw the hype cycle. I didn't want to participate in the hype cycle because the hype cycle is the getting lucky business. And the thing that validates the hype cycle is there are a couple of people that make a lot of money by getting lucky in that hype cycle. And good for them, right? Hats off. But the getting lucky business isn't really a business. It's just about getting lucky. And so you have to be able to see through the people that got lucky to figure out, okay, what are the true elements? And so when the hype cycle for Web3 started, I knew it was a hype cycle. I knew it was something I'd seen before. And I wanted to get to the other side and say, okay, where are there real use cases to scale the commercial activity behind this technology? And that coincided with the pandemic. So I also had a lot of time on my hands to think.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I mean, they definitely Web3 is a very interesting trajectory right now, and it has gone its ups and down, and their acceptance in the market and the technology itself. So as you've been talking about and mentioning the journey that happens, we have definitely seen a positive and negative perception over certain technologies that are used in Web3,
Mhm.
especially the blockchain or the tokenization. But just to add to that, and if you have seen right now in last probably year or so, the regulated financial industry and in general are trying to get into this right now. So like
Mhm.
this for the Bitcoin, and then now the tokenization in the public and the private market funds use a blockchain as a more secure and immutable technology that can be used for contracts. So which is really good. So people now seeing that, look, these technologies are actually good. It's just about how you use it.
Mhm.
Now you mentioned about adding the AI to it. So AI has started this journey many years back, but now it's just getting much more accessible. And getting it accessible meaning that we have to use it in a way that we can take advantage of it in the right way. And then
Mhm.
you grow from there and increase productivity in general, and then use it in the way so that it increases your business opportunities and open up different market segments. So I totally agree with you, and that's kind of driven us to Liquid Capital, the way we are and how we are approaching it. So given that you're our advisor and board member, so something has definitely excited you here. So if you can tell us about that and what excited you about Liquid Capital and especially the problem space that we are in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple things, right? So one is what I said before, right? It's a post-hype cycle company. Um, we've seen the hype cycle around Web3. We've seen the hype cycle around AI, and the way that Liquid Capital is using both of those technologies, right, um, is important to the actual activity. It's not bolted on afterwards. Um, but the underlying thought of creating secure secondary markets for illiquid investments, I find incredibly interesting. I've been in and around venture investing and venture companies for uh, 3, 4 decades now, going back to the 90s, right? So however you want to count that. Um, and one of the pain points that you experience first as an investor, right? If you're, I'm an LP in a couple of different funds, and when you sign up for that, right? It's 5 to 20 years to liquidity,
Right.
and um, depending on how the economy is at any given moment, that has more or less pressure on it. Right now, I think it's got a lot of pressure on it, and there's a lot of these funds that were pre-COVID, and they have a lot of money out there, and their path to liquidity for a lot of their investments isn't clear yet. And so they're under a lot of pressure from their investors, from their LPs, from folks like me who talk to the people running the funds and say, hey, what are we doing here when we get our money back? And so creating other paths so that you don't have to create what is effectively an artificial liquidity event just to satisfy the pressure, just to relieve the pressure from investors. That's never the best outcome. So creating another path hopefully leads to better outcomes for the actual companies. So that's one path that kind of got me here. And then the second is obviously I work for a large public company. And one of the challenges that public companies face as a strategic LP in these funds is a little bit different than a private investor, right? For a private investor, you invested some money, you want to get your money back, right? So as a strategic investor, there's multiple reasons why companies do strategic investments.
Right.
Acting as a strategic LP to some degree is about getting connected to the innovation that comes from venture funded companies. But it's also about putting capital to work on behalf of the company. And in the case of a public company, you have all of these illiquid investments. Um, Being able to ascribe a value to them that has credibility for whether it's an analyst or your investors or your employees. And a lot of these companies, employees participate in ownership. So there's a
Yep.
mixture of interest that you want to satisfy. Um, that's hard right now. And so the solution that Liquid Capital is pioneering, where you can create a secondary market which creates paths to liquidity for at least part of the investment, but also quantifies what the real value of that investment is in any given moment, because you have a marketplace that is driving a value. That's the core, right, of where I find it. Now, a lot of the mechanics and the complexity around compliance and reg tech and whatnot, I come from television, so a lot of this, people need to speak slowly, use smaller words, and then I can sort of understand. But that's really, from a strategy standpoint, being able to understand what the value of your holdings are, potentially being able to get past to liquidity. Those are new and novel, and I think uniquely enabled by the solution Liquid Capital is putting together, but also just the activity of creating a secure secondary market with a marketplace to back up the transactions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm first of all, thank you for explaining in a much better way than we've been talking and have done so far, because we often get generalized saying that there are solutions that are already available, and then what's the difference here. We've been digging into this and doing a lot of research around what are the real challenges are versus just another solution. The lack of technology implementations in this space kind of has contributed to many of the challenges that people are facing right now. That's definitely one thing. And people, I mean, not people really, and there's a lot of general conversations like, oh, this is just a liquidity, and there are many ways I can actually get this. My fund is not hurting, which is not really true, as you know. I mean, you are LP by yourself, and there are different kind of funds exist, and there are a lot of market data around this right now that how much illiquidity is there, and it's going to be a trend. But I'm going to put a different spin to this. As we are investing heavily with the technology to streamline many of these activities and put innovation around it and make it simpler and more regulated, compliance and everything around this, do you also see that this solution that we're developing can kind of become a new way of raising fund for the VC funds, and way of bundling things up to get continuous liquidity in the secondary market?
Well, I'm not 100% sure. Like, I've never actually run a venture fund, so like the internal mechanics of that, like, not sure how much of that I want to know, to be perfectly honest. But here's what I do believe, right, is when you enable smart, creative people, and as an industry, the venture capital industry has shown itself on the whole to be a smart, creative industry. Yes. When you empower smart, creative people with new tools that can empower new business models, they figure out stuff that you wouldn't even imagine.
Yep.
I mean, we're going through a version of this with AI in the television business and the entertainment business more broadly. And I get asked the question all the time, is AI going to replace artists? And the short answer is no. But the artists that don't learn how to use the new tool well are going to fall behind.
Correct.
And so it's a new tool. And I say, looking at the venture capital industry, I think what Liquid Capital is doing is building a new tool for the venture capital industry. Now, how they're going to use it, right? We may have ideas and theories, and that's why we're building it. But once it actually gets in the hands of the venture capital industry and smart, creative individuals, I think they're going to come up with ways to use it and use cases that are unique and novel, and may not even be the types of things we're thinking of now. And that's, I think, when magic happens, when your users take the basic technology you bring them, and they use it in a way that is important and accretive to the businesses that they're in, but they're still using it in a way you didn't anticipate. That's when magic happens.
Yeah. Totally agree. There's no doubt about it that technology definitely empowers you, not block you. And
the best technology does, yes.
Yes, best technologies, and the right usage of those technologies can really take you far.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one of the heart of our system that we are developing as a company, as a technology team, that we want to ensure that we're not cutting corners, and at the same time we're keeping it very transparent end to end about the information we're sharing and gathering, so that both the buyers and the sellers have everything at their fingertips in the real time, and nothing is cooked anywhere. So that's
And that gathering of information, that information coming back to you, like
yeah,
that's really critical to take that seriously, because that's where your users, your early users, are telling you how they're using it and how
yeah,
they'd like to be able to use it. Um and being able to sort of like understand which of those you should bet behind and build behind, and which of those you should understand, but they may not be the shortest path to scale for what you're building. That's the To me, that's the beauty and the magic of being involved in an early stage company. You know, the great thing about what you and the team are doing at Liquid Capital is there's a focus,
yeah,
right? Um, with most startups at this early stage, I would say that you got to be careful of not falling victim to startupitis, right? Startupitis is that wonderful moment where startup can do anything because it hasn't done anything.
yes,
And once you start doing things, you're making choices and you narrow the path, right? With Liquid Capital, we've got a group of folks that have been here and done this before, right? Folks that have started companies, grown companies, exited companies. And I think that helps us kind of take a more measured approach and a more focused approach at the same time to getting through those early stages where in general, startups experience lots and lots of distractions because of the range of opportunities that is presented by having actually not done anything yet. If that makes sense.
absolutely does. Absolutely does. So, Scott, I really, really appreciate your insights and this discussion. I think this is fascinating. I learned quite a bit. It's always fun to talk to you. So, anything last in conclusion you want to add before we conclude the session?
No, no, no. I appreciate all the work you and the team are doing, and appreciate you having me for a chat on the podcast. And I assume we'll do this again at some point soon.
Absolutely. So, for our viewers, thank you so much for joining. Scott, thanks for joining us here. I hope you find this episode very, really insightful. A lot of exciting things are happening at Liquid Capital, and we will be bringing out a lot of updates to you in very, very soon. So until next time, liquidity matters. Goodbye.